Hello and welcome to another podcast and video blog. This is the 20th episode, so I'm kind of excited about that. Hopefully it's going to be an interesting one. It's a very contentious subject, and I hope to give you both sides of the debate in homeopathic circles and in medical circles. Traditional scientific research has something to say about these subjects. So today we're going to cover vaccination, vaccinosis, and something called homeopathic prophylaxis. And I would like to say that as a homeopath, I get a lot of questions about this subject, and it was very important to be well informed about it. And I hope to give you a balanced opinion in relation to the subject. So I'm going to share my screen and look at a page about the subject so that we can, get all the information down properly in our minds. So first of all, what is a vaccination? It is an inoculation of a suspension of attenuated or killed microorganisms in order to afford protection against that like disease. For example, smallpox vaccine is administered to healthy persons to stimulate the immune system to recognize smallpox when exposed and eradicate it from the immune response if that person becomes infected. And so the history of such is from Edward Jenner. 1749 to 1823 was his lifespan, and he is considered the founder of immunology and coined the term virus, though he did not coin the term vaccination. He also described the condition of anaphylaxis and is the first pioneer in the field of virology. His theories were collected into his 1798 book, An Inquiry into the Causes and Effects of the Variolae Vaccinae. That's the name of the bacteria, vaccinae, and hence we have vaccination from that word. So, this became really the start of the vaccination protocols, and it spread very quickly. Even President Jefferson at the time vaccinated his family and neighbors. And Jenner discovered that persons who had cowpox were immune from contracting smallpox. After experimentation, he made his vaccine from the matter from the arm of a milkmaid who had been infected with cowpox and who had been known to be resistant to smallpox. This matter was on May 14th of 1796, where he inserted into a country boy, James Phipps, who then, when exposed to smallpox, did not come to get the disease, did not become infected. So one perspective in relation to homeopathy is that vaccination is just a crude form of homeopathy. And that's, not my opinion. It is a opinion, and there's valid reasons for that opinion. Just as the statement, the like treats like concept is surprisingly simple, and while some go to great pains to deny it, it is also the rationale behind vaccines. And so this was a quote from a court case related to homeoprophylaxis versus vaccination, published in Homeopathy in 2014, quoted by, the quote is from Fran Sheffield. So that's a little history about vaccination. And now we come to the subject of vaccinosis. This is the malaise or effects, the sequelae caused by the administration of vaccines to healthy individuals, including fever, muscle aches, bone pain, prostration. And we know, neurological diseases, cardiovascular conditions. We know that the immune system can become dysregulated. And there's no doubt, as a homeopath, that I've seen the consequences of that. There's a very important book from Harris Coulter called A Shot in the Dark, and this is a quote. We have been taught to believe in the wisdom of vaccination, but how much do parents or even scientists and doctors really know about the crippling side effects of vaccines? Particularly in the case of the pertussis vaccine, which is supposed to protect against whooping cough. Are we giving our children a shot in the dark? So, famous homeopath wrote about the similarities between the smallpox disease and a certain homeopathic remedy called thuja. And the term vaccinosis was coined by a Dr. Goulon of Weimar in a paper he published on the subject in 1877. So this is this is well after Jenner's original experiments. And, doctors were aware of those side effects from that time. And he related it to what's called a miasm named psychosis, which Hahnemann described in the early 1800s, excuse me. And he related the symptoms occurring after smallpox vaccinations to the symptoms of psychotic gonorrhea. Later, James Compton Burnett, a very famous homeopath, described the phenomena in a book called Vaccinosis and Its Cure by Thuja in 1884, where he reported his experiences curing the diseases following vaccination with the remedy Thuja. And it is postulated by many homeopaths that Thuja is a kind of antidote to the effects of vaccines, but that's not true. Thuja is an antidote to the vaccine for smallpox, because if you develop an immune response to the smallpox vaccine, the symptoms will be similar to those that are treated by Thuja. Whereas if you have a consequence of DPT, diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus, Thuja would not likely be a remedy you could choose. We have to, as homeopaths, prescribe on what has changed in the health of the patient from the time they were healthy and now that they are symptomatic. That is what we prescribe on. So there is this term called homeopathic prophylaxis, homeoprophylaxis. And this is supposed to be an alternative way of educating the immune system to better prevent and respond to infectious diseases using homeopathy. It can be defined as the use of homeopathic remedy to prevent like with like. And that, in theory, is true. So they theorized that dosing with the nosode named pertussinum, which is the whooping cough, essentially pertussis vaccine made homeopathically, will prevent whooping cough infection. We might also add the concept of a genus epidemicus as a form of homeoprophylaxis. So when you have an outbreak of an illness like scarlet fever, what's called the genus epidemicus in homeopathy is the remedy that is most likely to treat the effects of a person having scarlet fever. In other words, their symptoms. So we can better predict the genus epidemicus and use a homeoprophylaxis remedy based on the symptomology. So whereas the idea of pertussis being able to treat an illness that has not even been caught yet is more questionable and isn't necessarily in keeping with the theories of homeopathy. However, there are really good arguments for its use as well. So this is a great debate, and there are many, many useful pieces of information on the internet about it. So in a homeopathic practice, we could, be working with people who have had vaccination. And I would say the most important thing about vaccinations is how can we find out the susceptibility of children to have a bad response to a vaccine? That is the most important issue, because there's no doubt that if you give a vaccine and there is a consequence to that, the child develops side effects from it, those are very lasting. We have imparted a chronic disease upon the child, and then we need to treat the side effects of that disease. So it's more tricky. So, in the COVID outbreak, I had a call from a family who had all 4 two parents, two children, gotten the COVID vaccine. And they called because they were starting to get sick. Two of the kids were sick, and the one had really not much, very mild symptoms, no need for a remedy. The other had a more developed flu, head cold, sore throat, mild cough. And we did give a remedy, and that was for the cough, the symptoms at the time, regardless of the vaccine. In fact, it may well have shown that the vaccine was very helpful for them in that case, because they actually had a good immune response to the COVID virus. Whereas when we talk about vaccinosis, there is that idea that we can give a remedy after that, and it's so commonly thuya. Well, that's not true. Homeopathy is a historical medicine, and much of what is learned is historical information, and we apply what was known then to what we need to use now, and that is the case of thuya. It was good for the consequences of smallpox vaccine in the 1800s, but now it's not. In fact, this monkeypox was really basically smallpox, very similar perhaps, and we might need to give thuya if people had the vaccine and had a bad response. So for true homeopathic prescriptions, there is no specific anti-vaccine remedy. So when faced with a reaction to a vaccine, it is simply the patient's symptoms that will define the remedy choice. So in this idea of homeopathic prophylaxis, there's a lot of debate. And, for example, my own family, the only one I chose to do was pertussis for whooping cough. And that was when a outbreak had occurred, and there were kids in the neighborhood who had it, vaccinated or not vaccinated. I just didn't want my little ones getting whooping cough, so I would give that. And who knows whether it helped or not. May have turned into a mild cold, which is, easily treated, whether left alone or with a remedy. In fact, one of the reasons that I felt so secure was because I'm privileged in that I'm a homeopath and I can, take care of those acute illnesses. Not everyone has that privilege. So there's a very important study that was done at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and they gave 3 cohorts. One cohort real vaccines, one cohort homeopathic vaccines, and one cohort placebo. The ultimate story is that the antigens that they measured for and the Tdap tests they did for immune response of the illnesses that they tested, which were quite a broad spectrum, the homeopathic group had no immune markers. Exactly the same as the placebo group, and the vaccination group had good markers for immune response to those illnesses. So does it argue against homeoprophylaxis? Yeah, on one side, if your only measure is the blood immune system, whereas the immune system is more complex and there may be still other factors, and perhaps that group should have been followed over a couple of years to know what was their outcome without regular vaccines and only the homeopathic vaccines. Whereas the other one, there's lots of debate between homeopaths, and it's not a proven point. Whereas there is a wonderful study from Cuba, large-scale Cuban study treating leptospirosis, a bacteria that infects in the tropical season, rainy season, where it gets into the skin, gets into the eyes and mouth, and can cause kidney disease and failure, other organ failure as well. So very serious illness. And they did a large-scale study using the leptospirosis homeopathically, just like a vaccine, and given it homeopathically. And it will be still used to this day because it's very effective, especially in the outbreaks where, flooding or access to medical care is much reduced and hygiene is reduced. So therefore, it could be essential. So most people who ask me about homeoprophylaxis are parents wanting to avoid the risks of pharmaceutical vaccinations or having already refused pharmaceutical vaccinations. So what can I do? I can give them information. There are, protocols, and if anyone's interested, I can share that. I'm not going to do so now, but if you can take a snapshot of these websites, you can see where you could get information. So that's about it. I don't want to stand on either side of this discussion. I just want to give the information about it and allow people a little knowledge. And there is, valid reasons to be concerned about vaccines. So thank you so much for listening and being interested in this controversial subject about homeopathy and vaccines. And take care. Speak to you soon.